We begin in the Middle Jurassic, approximately 165 million years ago. The world is a vast blue expanse dominated by the rhythmic pulse of the Tethys Ocean. Here, the sunlight does not merely hit the surface, it dissolves into the depths, casting long golden ribbons through the clear warm water of the Callovian stage. There are no rushing currents here. The sea is shallow and expansive, creeping over the low-lying lands of the European archipelago. Beneath the surface, the floor of the Oxford Clay Formation is a soft grey velvet of fine silt and clay. It settles grain by grain, a slow and silent rain of mineral dust that has been falling for millennia. This is a world of suspended animation, where time is measured not by hours, but by the slow drift of the tides. The temperature of the water is a constant, gentle warmth. In this greenhouse climate, the tropical sea acts as a reservoir of heat, stabilizing the environment from the surface down to the silty benthos. There is a profound sense of equilibrium. The chemistry of the water is rich, laden with the fundamental elements required for life to flourish in abundance. In the upper layers of the water column, the light is at its brightest. This is the photic zone, the engine of the ancient ocean. Here, billions of microscopic organisms, the phytoplankton, capture the sun's energy. They do not swim. They simply exist, drifting with the slow circular gyres of the Jurassic currents. They are the invisible foundation upon which all the giants of this era are built. As the sun moves across the sky, the light within the water shifts from pale turquoise to a deep, meditative sapphire. There is no sound but the low, muffled thrum of the moving sea, a heavy, liquid silence that envelops everything. In this space, gravity feels distant. Everything is buoyant, held in the firm yet soft embrace of the saline water. Through the haze of the distant blue, a shape begins to manifest. It is not a sudden movement, but a gradual thickening of the light. It is a silhouette of immense proportions, moving with a grace that defies its massive scale. It does not struggle against the water, it glides through it, a natural extension of the ocean's own flow. This is the beginning of a long journey through the quiet corridors of the past. We are observers of a world that moved at a different pace, a world where the gentle giants of the Pachycormidae family reigned in silence. The dawn of the Callovian is a peaceful one, a sanctuary of water and light, waiting for the story of the great filter feeder to unfold. The great shape draws closer, moving with a steady, unhurried rhythm. To understand this traveler, we must look back through the deep layers of time, into the history of its own kind. This animal is a member of the Pachycormidae, a family of ancient ray-finned fish that appeared and flourished during the Mesozoic era. They are actinopterygians, a lineage defined by the delicate bony rays that support their fins. But the pachycormids followed a unique evolutionary path, drifting away from the smaller, swifter fish of the reefs toward the vast, open spaces of the pelagic zone. Over millions of years, their forms adapted to the requirements of the endless blue, trading rapid bursts of speed for the enduring strength needed to cross oceans. In the quiet of the Tethys, we see the culmination of this lineage. Leedsichthys represents the furthest reach of this family's growth. While their ancestors were modest in size, the pressure of the environment and the abundance of the Jurassic seas encouraged a transition toward the majestic. They became the first group of bony fish to master the art of giantism, filling a role in the ecosystem that had never been occupied in such a way before. The skeleton of the pachycormid is a marvel of ancient engineering. It is not made of heavy, solid bone alone. Instead, it is a sophisticated blend of bone and calcified cartilage. This structure provides a lightweight internal framework, allowing the animal to maintain its immense size without being anchored by its own weight. It is a body designed for buoyancy, a vessel that is perfectly weighted to the density of the seawater. Every line of their anatomy is an answer to the ocean's demands. Their scales, unlike the heavy armor of more primitive fish, became smaller and more streamlined, reducing the friction as they move through the water. They are built for fluid motion, for a life spent entirely within the water column, never touching the seafloor, never breaking the surface. As the Leedsichthys glides past, we recognize it not as a monster of the deep, but as a masterpiece of evolutionary patience. It is the living record of its ancestors, a silent witness to the success of the pachycormid line. It carries within its DNA the history of a family that learned to harvest the smallest lives in the sea to become the greatest among them. The lineage is a long, slow climb through the strata of the earth, eventually resulting in this peaceful titan. Here, in the heart of the Jurassic, the pachycormid has found its perfect moment in time. To look upon the Leedsichthys is to witness the sheer scale of Jurassic life. Its presence is defined not by aggression, but by volume. Measuring this giant is a task of patience for those who study the Earth, as the very cartilage that made it so buoyant in life makes it fragile in the fossil record. Yet, through the meticulous recovery of the Aristotle specimen and other fragments from the Oxford clay, the true proportions of this fish emerge. From the blunt, powerful curve of its snout to the trailing edge of its tail, the Leedsichthys reaches lengths that exceed any other bony fish known to science. It is a creature of 10, 15, and perhaps even 16 meters, a living island moving through the sapphire dark. The head is a vast structure composed of a complex mosaic of thin, interlocking dermal plates. Unlike the solid, heavy skulls of land-dwelling creatures, the skull of Leedsichthys is surprisingly light and flexible. This allows the animal to open its mouth to an incredible width, creating a cavernous intake for the nutrient-rich water. It is an anatomical design centered entirely around the act of gathering, a vessel built to contain the sea itself. Within the torso, the skeletal architecture remains delicate. The vertebrae are not fully ossified, retaining a core of soft tissue that provided flexibility in the ancient currents. This lack of heavy mineralization allowed the Leedsichthys to reach such immense sizes without becoming too heavy to swim. It moved as a collection of gracefully connected parts, a fluid giant in a fluid world. The skin that covers this frame is textured with millions of tiny tooth-like scales known as lepidopterygia. These provide the subtle, shimmering armor that protects the animal while maintaining its hydrodynamic efficiency. In the dim light of the Jurassic depths, the skin would appear as a matte, neutral grey, blending perfectly with the shadows of the open ocean. Every aspect of this anatomy is a testament to the fossil-verified reality of the Middle Jurassic. There is no need for exaggeration. The truth of its dimensions is written in the mineralized remains found within the clay. It is a body shaped by the physics of the water, a giant that found the perfect balance between mass and motion, existing as a peaceful monument to the possibilities of life. The most vital mechanism of the Leedsichthys is hidden just behind its massive jaws. As the fish moves forward, it does not strike or grasp. It simply opens its mouth, allowing the ocean to flow through it. This is ram filter feeding, a process of quiet, continuous harvest. Inside the throat lies a specialized architecture, the gill rakers, that transforms the animal into a living sieve. These gill rakers are not the simple structures found in smaller fish. In Leedsichthys, they have evolved into long, delicate, comb-like arrays. Thousands of these bony filaments line the branchial baskets, creating a mesh so fine it can capture organisms invisible to the naked eye. As seawater is forced through this mesh by the animal's forward momentum, the water exits through the gill slits, leaving behind a concentrated feast of life. This filtration system is a marvel of biological efficiency. The surface area of these rakers is immense, allowing the fish to process thousands of liters of water every hour. It targets the zooplankton's small crustaceans, larvae and microscopic drifters that cloud the Jurassic seas in great invisible meadows. There is no struggle in this feeding, only a constant rhythmic straining of the blue. The fossils of these gill baskets are among the most significant finds for paleontologists. They reveal a structure that was both fragile and incredibly robust, capable of withstand the constant flow of the Tethys. The rakers are often the only parts of the skeleton that survive the passage of millions of years, Found as needle-like fragments within the Oxford clay, they are the silent evidence of a giant that lived on the smallest of scales. Because it feeds so low on the food chain, the Leedsichthys is directly connected to the pulse of the ocean's primary productivity. It does not chase its prey, it follows the blooms. It drifts where the nutrients are densest, its mouth a permanent gateway for the microscopic abundance of the sea. It is a peaceful, automated existence, fueled by the endless soup of the Middle Jurassic. In the dim sapphire light, the constant opening and closing of the opercula the gill covers is the only sound of its labor. It is the breath and the meal combined into one singular fluid motion. The sieve of the sea ensures that even a giant of 16 meters can be sustained by a world of tiny things. The world of Leedsichthys is a world of the invisible. To understand the giant, one must look into the suspension of the seawater itself, where the true wealth of the Jurassic resides. The oceans of the Callovian are thick with life not of bone and muscle, but of glass and light. These are the planktonic blooms, the vast, drifting meadows of the open sea. At the base of this ancient food web are the phytoplankton. In the sun-drenched upper layers of the Tethys, these single-celled organisms perform the quiet miracle of photosynthesis. They utilize the carbon-rich atmosphere of the Jurassic to build their tiny bodies, releasing oxygen back into the water. Among them are dinoflagellates and early coccolithophores, tiny architects that construct shells of calcium carbonate. When viewed in the aggregate, they turn the blue water into a clouded, emerald haze. Feeding upon this microscopic flora is a second layer of life, the zooplankton. This community is composed of diverse organisms, from the larvae of crustaceans to tiny shrimp-like eukaryotes. They are the primary harvesters of the emerald haze, converting the energy of the sun-seekers into animal protein. For Leedsichthys, these drifting swarms are the only source of sustenance that matters. They do not exist in isolation. They move in great shifting clouds directed by the temperature and salinity of the currents. The density of this life is staggering. During a bloom, a single liter of seawater can contain millions of individual organisms. This concentrated biomass is what allows a fish of 16 meters to survive without ever hunting. It is a system of extreme efficiency. By feeding directly on the plankton, Leedsichthys skips the energy loss of higher predatory levels. It goes straight to the source, grazing on the ocean's breath. In the calm, slow movement of the deep sea, these plankton clouds appear as marine snow. Bits of organic matter, dead cells, and waste slowly drift downward, creating a constant rain of nutrients. For the Leedsichthys, swimming through a bloom is like moving through a thick, nutritious fog. It simply parts the water, and the bounty of the Jurassic follows the path of least resistance into its waiting gills. There is a profound peace in this relationship. The largest vertebrate in the sea is entirely dependent on the smallest, most fragile life forms. The giant does not deplete the ocean, it participates in its abundance. As long as the sun shines and the currents bring the nutrients to the surface, the meadows of the Tethys will remain full, and the path of the Leedsichthys will be paved in gold. In the quiet depths, the act of eating and the act of breathing are one and the same. For a fish of such immense scale, the demand for oxygen is constant and significant. Leedsichthys does not possess the luxury of resting. To stop moving is to risk a decline in the vital gases that fuel its massive muscles. This is the necessity of obligate ram ventilation. As the giant glides forward, its mouth remains slightly agape, a gateway for the oxygen-rich Jurassic waters. The same forward motion that drags plankton into its gill rakers also forces water over its primary and secondary lamellae. These are the delicate blood-rich tissues where the exchange of gases occurs. Oxygen is pulled from the water into the bloodstream, while carbon dioxide, the waste of a giant's metabolism, is released back into the Tethys. The gill surface area of Leedsichthys is proportionally vast, a fossil verified adaptation that mirrors its extreme body size. To sustain a body that can reach 16 meters, the total area of the respiratory membranes must be enormous. This allows the fish to maintain a steady, though low-energy, metabolic rate. It is not a sprinter. It is a marathon walker of the seas, moving with a calm, uninterrupted persistence that ensures its blood is always refreshed by the sea. This process is silent and rhythmic. The large obiuacula, or gill covers, do not pump vigorously like those of smaller, sedentary fish. Instead, they remain partially flared, allowing a smooth, laminar flow of water to exit the body. This reduces turbulence and conserves energy, a critical factor for an animal that must find its food in the vastness of the open ocean. Because its respiration is tied to its movement, the Leedsichthys is a creature of perpetual motion. Even in the dim hours of the Jurassic night, it continues its slow, directional cruise. It follows the oxygen-rich upper layers of the water column, avoiding the stagnant, low-oxygen zones of the deep benthos. Its life is a balance of fluid dynamics, a steady harvest of air and energy from the water that surrounds it. Every pulse of its heart is synchronized with the flow of the ocean through its gills. It is a breathing machine of incredible efficiency, a testament to how life can scale upward by merging the most basic needs into a single, elegant movement. To move a body of such immense displacement requires a mastery of fluid dynamics. The Leedsichthys does not fight the water. It navigates it with a design that emphasizes stability and conservation of energy. Every fin on its body is a specialized tool, tuned by millions of years of evolution to move a giant through a medium 800 times denser than air. The primary engine of propulsion is the caudal fin, or tail. In Leedsichthys, this fin is large and symmetrical, a shape known as homocircle, shape known as homocur. Driven by massive blocks of lateral muscle, the tail sweeps in slow, powerful arcs. This motion creates a vortex of pressure that pushes the fish forward. Because of its sheer mass, once the Leedsichthys gains momentum, its inertia allows it to glide for long distances with minimal effort, a vital trait for a long-range cruiser. Providing balance and direction are the pectoral fins. These are long and blade-like, extending from the sides of the body just behind the head. Unlike the flexible fins of modern reef fish, these are relatively rigid, acting like the wings of an underwater glider. By subtly adjusting the angle of these fins, the Leedsichthys can change its depth or bank into a gentle turn without breaking its rhythmic pace. They serve as stabilizers, preventing the massive body from rolling in the shifting Jurassic currents. The dorsal and anal fins, located along the top and bottom of the rear torso, act as keels. They provide vertical stability, ensuring the fish remains upright even when navigating turbulent upwellings. Fossil evidence shows that these fins were supported by numerous fine bony rays, or lepidottrichia, which allowed for subtle micro-adjustments in surface tension. This hydrodynamic profile is perfectly suited for the pelagic zone. The Leedsichthys is not built for the sudden turns of a coral reef or the camouflage of the seafloor. It is built for the infinite blue. Its movement is characterized by a low Reynolds number, a physical state where the viscosity of the water is balanced by the animal's massive scale. It moves with a heavy, liquid grace, a titan that has found the most efficient path through the weight of the sea. In the silence of the ancient Tethys, the only evidence of its passage is a slow, powerful waker ripple in the water that lingers long after the giant has drifted into the shadows. The world inhabited by Leedsichthys is recorded in the layers of the Oxford Clay Formation, a geological sequence that stretches across what is now the heart of England and parts of France. During the Callovian and Oxfordian stages, this region was not land, but a vast epicontinental sea. It was a shallow basin, rarely exceeding 100 meters in depth, yet it spanned thousands of square kilometers of open water. The floor of this sea was a quiet, dark expanse of fine-grained mud. Because the basin was sheltered from the violent storms of the open Tethys, the water at the bottom remained remarkably still. This low-energy environment allowed the finest particles of clay to settle out of suspension, layer by layer, over millions of years. This process created a soft, anaerobic graveyard place, where the lack of oxygen prevented scavengers from destroying the remains of the giants that fell from above. The water column itself was thermally stratified. The upper layers were warmed by the Jurassic sun, fueling the plankton blooms we have seen. Below, the water grew cooler and more stagnant. This stratification was essential for the preservation of fossils. As a Leedsichthys carcass reached the seabed, it was often enveloped in these oxygen-poor silts before it could decompose or be torn apart. This is why we find such delicate structures, like the hair-fine gill rakers, preserved in such exquisite detail. The chemistry of the Oxford clay was rich in organic carbon and iron. These minerals often leached into the bones of the deceased, turning them into the dark, heavy fossils that are unearthed today. The environment was also characterized by a lack of strong tides, creating a stable, predictable habitat for pelagic life. It was a maritime sanctuary, a cradle of Jurassic biodiversity where the cycles of life and death were managed by the slow, inevitable accumulation of mud. To stand in an English clay pit today is to stand at the bottom of that ancient sea. The grey, sticky mud underfoot is the very same silt that once drifted through the gills of a Leedsichthys. It is a silent witness to a world of liquid gold and sapphire dark, a place where the environment was perfectly tuned to support the largest fish the world has ever known. The blue expanse of the Tethys is far from empty. While Leedsichthys drifts through the upper reaches, it shares this liquid cathedral with a vast array of life, each species occupying its own distinct layer of the sea. The most successful and numerous of these neighbors are the cephalopods, the masters of buoyancy and propulsion in the Jurassic world. In every direction, schools of belemnites dart through the water. These are ancient relatives of the squid, possessing internal bullet-shaped shells known as rostra. They move in synchronized pulses, their streamlined bodies cutting through the currents with ease. To the Leedsichthys, they are mere flickers of light in the periphery, part of the living background of the pelagic zone. Their calcified remains are so abundant in the Oxford clay that they form entire layers of the seafloor, a testament to their staggering biomass. Alongside the belemnites are the ammonites, the iconic coiled wanderers of the Mesozoic. These animals inhabit complex chambered shells that they use as ballast. By regulating the amount of gas and fluid within these chambers, they can hover effortlessly at specific depths, drifting vertically like miniature submarines. They are the slow-moving philosophers of the mid-water, feeding on tiny crustaceans and organic particles, undisturbed by the passage of the giants above them. The ecosystem is also home to various smaller fish, many of which belong to the same pachycormid family as Leedsichthys family as Leedsichthys. While their giant cousin has specialized in filter feeding, these smaller relatives remain agile predators, chasing the silver flashes of early teleosts and crustaceans. They are the swift, sharp edges of a world where the Leedsichthys is the soft, rounded center. There is a profound lack of competition in this space, because Leedsichthys has specialized in a food source, the microscopic plankton that few other large vertebrates can harvest so efficiently. It exists in a state of peaceful coexistence with its neighbors. It does not hunt the belemnites, and the ammonites have no reason to fear its shadow. The pelagic zone is a theater of diverse strategies. The rapid pulse of the squid-like belemnites, the steady drift of the ammonites, and the constant rhythmic cruise of the great filter feeder. Together they form a balanced community, a complex web of life that sustains itself on the sun-fueled abundance of the Jurassic Sea. In the quiet, suspended world of the Middle Jurassic, the ammonites are the ubiquitous timekeepers of the sea. These cephalopods, encased in their intricate planispiral shells, populate the Tethys in a dazzling array of forms and sizes. While the Leedsichthys moves with the steady purpose of a long-distance traveler, the ammonites exist in a state of eternal drift, their lives dictated by the subtle shifts in water density and pressure. The ammonite shell is a masterpiece of prehistoric biological engineering, divided into numerous internal chambers by complex walls known as septa. The shell acts as a sophisticated buoyancy device. The animal lives only in the outermost, largest chamber, while the inner chambers are filled with a precise mixture of gas and liquid. By utilizing a tube called a siphuncle to alter this internal balance, the ammonite can rise or fall through the water column with minimal expenditure of energy. Within the Oxford clay, species such as Cosmoceras and Quenstedtoceras are found in extraordinary numbers. Their shells are often preserved with a shimmering iridescent layer of original mother-of-pearl or nacre. These animals are not fast swimmers. They move primarily by gentle jet propulsion, ejecting water through a funnel to pulse slowly through the shadows. They spend their lives in a vertical dance, ascending to the plankton-rich surface at night and retreating to the safety of the dim, cooler depths during the day. The relationship between the Leedsichthys and the ammonite is one of silent indifference. To the great fish, the ammonite is a harmless pebble in the water, a hard-shelled drifter that poses no threat and offers no nutrition. For the ammonite, the passing of a 16-meter titan is merely a temporary displacement of the current, a massive shadow that briefly obscures the sun before the blue returns to its steady, tranquil state. As the ammonites age, their shells record the history of their growth, adding new, larger chambers in a logarithmic spiral. When they eventually die, their shells become miniature ecosystems on the seafloor, providing hard surfaces for corals and bryozoans to attach to in an otherwise muddy world. They are the decorative ornaments of the Jurassic Sea, drifting by the thousands in a slow-motion parade that defines the peaceful character of the Callovian deep. In this liquid world, the ammonite drift is a reminder that beauty and complexity exist at every scale, from the massive sweep of a giant's tail to the perfect mathematical curve of a coiled shell. Below the sun-drenched paths of the Leedsichthys, the seafloor of the Oxford clay exists in a state of eternal, cold twilight. Here the weight of the ocean above is felt in the stillness of the water. This is the benthos, a world defined by the slow accumulation of soft grey mud and the constant silent arrival of marine snow, the organic fragments and minerals that drift down from the surface world. The inhabitants of this muddy floor are specialized for a life of patience. Among the most common are the Graphia, an extinct genus of oysters often called devil's toenails due to their thick, curved shells. These bivalves do not move. They rest upon the soft substrate, their heavy lower shells anchoring them in the silt. They survive by filtering the fine organic particles that settle around them, a sedentary echo of the great filter-feeding fish miles above, living alongside the oysters of the brachiopods, delicate lamp shells that anchor themselves to any available hard fragment, often the discarded shell of a dead ammonite. Their rhythmic opening and closing is the only movement in an otherwise static landscape. Nearby, the crinoids, or sea lilies, extend their feathery arms into the slow-moving bottom currents. Though they look like plants, these are echinoderms, animals that capture microscopic debris with sticky, mucus-covered appendages. The benthos is a place of recycling and restoration. The waste produced by the giant Leedsichthys and the skulls of belemnites provides the primary fuel for this bottom-dwelling community. In this way, the energy of the sun, captured by the plankton at the surface, eventually reaches the darkest corners of the seabed. It is a closed loop of nutrients where nothing is wasted, and every organism has its place. Because the oxygen levels in these deep silts are often low, the pace of life is incredibly slow. There are no fast predators here, only the steady mechanical filtration of the water. The seafloor is a silent witness to the history of the ocean above. It is here that the bones of the giants will eventually rest, buried by the same mud that sustains the oysters and the lilies. In the muffled quiet of the Jurassic benthos, time seems to stop. The only change is the gradual thickening of the clay, a soft burial that preserves the story of the sea for millions of years to come. The peaceful cruise of the Leedsichthys is occasionally crossed by the elegant silhouettes of the plesiosaurs. These are not fish, but marine reptiles that have returned to the sea, adapting their limbs into four powerful wing-like flippers. In the waters of the Oxford clay, the most common variety is the cryptoclid plesiosaur, a creature defined by its moderate size and exceptionally long, flexible neck. The plesiosaur moves through the water with a unique underwater flight, a rhythmic flapping of its paddles that allows it to hover and turn with high precision. While the Leedsichthys relies on steady momentum, the plesiosaur is a master of maneuverability. Its long neck, composed of numerous specialized vertebrae, act as a mobile strike system, allowing the animal to move its head independently of its body to intercept fast-moving prey. Inside the small, streamlined skull of a plesiosaur are rows of thin, needle-like teeth. These are not designed for crushing or chewing, but for forming a cage. When a plesiosaur strikes at a school of small fish or soft-bodied cephalopods, the teeth interlock, trapping their slippery prey instantly. This specialized dentition is a hallmark of the fossil-verified diet of these reptiles, which focused on the smaller inhabitants of the Tethys. Despite their predatory nature, there is no conflict between the plesiosaur and the Leedsichthys. The giant fish is far too large to be considered prey, and its filter feeding habits do not compete with the plesiosaur's hunt for individual fish. They occupy the same blue cathedral in a state of mutual neutrality. A plesiosaur might even swim alongside the giant for a time, utilizing the slick stream created by the massive fish to conserve its own energy. The presence of these reptiles adds a different rhythm to the sea. Where the Leedsichthys is a constant, heavy pulse, the plesiosaur is a series of fluid, darting movements. They represent the diversity of the Middle Jurassic, a time when the ocean was large enough to hold both the massive, unhurried filter feeder and the graceful feeder and the graceful long-necked hunter in perfect silent balance. While the plesiosaurs navigate with grace, the ichthyosaurs are the undisputed masters of speed in the Jurassic Sea. These reptiles have evolved into a form so perfectly streamlined that they mirror the shape of modern dolphins, though they are entirely unrelated. In the deep, sapphire waters of the Tethys, the most prominent of these is Ophthalmosaurus, a creature whose very name speaks to its most remarkable fossil-verified feature: its eyes. The eyes of Ophthalmosaurus are immense, some of the largest in proportion to body size of any vertebrate to ever exist. They are reinforced by a sclerotic ring, a circle of bone within the eye that prevents the soft tissue from deforming under the immense pressure of the deep ocean. These eyes are specialized light-gathering instruments, allowing the ichthyosaur to see in the dim twilight layers of the sea where the sun's rays are nearly extinguished. This suggests they were deep divers, pursuing squid and fish in the dark. The ichthyosaur's movement is a sharp contrast to the slow cruise of the Leedsichthys. Its body is built for thunniform swimming propulsion generated by a powerful vertical tail fin, while the rest of the body remains stiff to reduce drag. They are the high-speed interceptors of the pelagic zone, capable of traversing vast distances of the open ocean in search of concentrated food sources. Despite their speed and predatory prowess, ichthyosaurs and Leedsichthys exist in a shared, peaceful habitat. The giant fish remains in the upper, plankton-rich layers, while the ichthyosaur often plunges into the depths or races through the blue in search of swifter prey. They represent two different solutions to the problem of oceanic life, one sustained by the infinite tiny particles of the surface, the other by the active pursuit of the deep. In the quiet of the Jurassic, an Ophthalmosaurus might flash past the Leedsichthys like a silver bolt, a brief moment of high energy in an otherwise meditative world. They are the voyagers of the Tethys, silent, fast, and perfectly adapted to the shadows of the ancient sea. The tranquility of the Jurassic Sea is periodically stirred by forces far beyond the reach of the eye. While the water often feels still, it is subject to the great mechanical breath of the planet, seasonal upwelling, driven by the rotation of the Earth and the steady push of trade winds against the Pangaean coastlines. The surface waters are occasionally pushed aside, creating a vacuum that can only be filled from below. From the dark, cold canyons of the deep Tethys, nutrient-rich water begins to rise. This water is heavy with nitrates, phosphates, and the decayed remains of past generations that have settled on the benthos. As this cold surge reaches the sunlit photic zone, it acts as a potent fertilizer. The result is an immediate and explosive bloom of life, a biological transformation that turns a sapphire blue into a thick, opaque emerald. For the Leedsichthys, these upwelling events are the focal points of existence. The sudden density of phytoplankton and the subsequent swarms of zooplankton create a feast of unimaginable proportions. The giant fish does not need to search, it simply positions itself within the nutrient stream. With its mouth wide, it glides through the concentrated soup, its gill rakers working at maximum capacity to harvest the surging biomass. These events are predictable, dictated by the tilt of the Earth and the changing of the Jurassic seasons. The Leedsichthys populations likely followed these invisible highways of cold water, migrating across the epicontinental seas to reach the blooms at their peak. It is a journey governed by the physics of the ocean, a rhythmic migration that ensures the giant can maintain its massive scale. In the midst of an upwelling, the sea is loud with life. Though the Leedsichthys remains calm, the sheer volume of organisms moving through its gills creates a low, rushing hum. It is the sound of the ocean replenishing itself. As the seasons shift and the winds die down, the upwelling ceases and the giant drifts back into the quiet, leaner waters of the open sea, sustained by the energy of the emerald surge. The life story of a Leedsichthys is not merely written in the shape of its fins, but deep within the microscopic architecture of its skeleton. Through the science of bone histology, researchers examined thin, translucent sections of fossilized remains to unlock the secrets of how these giants reached their staggering size. Within these mineralized layers lies a biological diary of years, seasons, and the steady passage of time. When viewed under a microscope, the bone tissue of Leedsichthys reveals a pattern of lines of arrested growth, lags. Similar to the rings found within the trunk of an ancient tree, each ring represents a cycle of growth, likely corresponding to the seasonal fluctuations of the Jurassic climate. By counting these intervals, scientists can confirm that these fish did not achieve their scale overnight. They were long-lived survivors, potentially growing for over 40 or 50 years. The bone itself is highly vascularized, filled with tiny channels that once carried blood to the growing tissue. This indicates a rapid growth rate during the juvenile stages. Like many modern giants, Leedsichthys likely prioritized growth early in life to quickly outpace the size of most predators. Once a certain threshold of mass was reached, the growth slowed but never truly stopped, a process known as indeterminate growth. This histological evidence also tells us about the animal's metabolism. The consistency of the bone layers suggests a steady, stable body temperature supported by the warm, greenhouse environment of the Callovian seas. There are no signs of the erratic growth spurts seen in animals struggling with food scarcity. Instead, the bone reflects a life of relative abundance, fueled by the reliable plankton blooms of the Tethys. Every fragment of a Leedsichthys rib or fin ray is more than just a stone. It is a record of every season the animal survived, every upwelling it fed upon, and every year it spent drifting through the blue. The giant scale was not a miracle, but the result of decades of patient, persistent accumulation, a slow-motion masterpiece of biological time. The architecture of Leedsichthys is a study in biological balance. To sustain a body of such immense displacement, the skeleton had to be both strong enough to support massive muscle attachments and light enough to maintain neutral buoyancy. The solution found in the pachycormid lineage was a specialized hybrid of dermal bone and calcified cartilage, a structural strategy that is clearly visible in the fossil record. While the exterior plates of the head and the rays of the fins are composed of true bone, much of the internal framework, including the massive backbone and the supports for the gill baskets, remained cartilaginous. This cartilage was not soft like that of a modern shark, but was often reinforced with crusts of mineralized calcium. This created a skeleton that was flexible and resilient, capable of absorbing the stresses of moving through the dense Jurassic water without the brittle heaviness of a fully ossified frame. This unique composition is the reason why finding a completed Leedsichthys is an impossibility. When the animal died, the soft cartilage would often decay or be crushed by the weight of the settling Oxford clay before it could mineralize. What remains are the hard parts, the dense bony plates of the skull, the thousands of needle-like gill rakers, and the robust fin rays. These fragments are often found scattered across the seabed, like the pieces of a giant submerged puzzle. The skull itself is a marvel of this lightweight design. Rather than a single solid block of bone, it is made of dozens of thin, overlapping plates. This allowed for a degree of cranial kinesis, a slight flexibility that helped the fish manage the massive volume of water passing through its mouth during filter feeding. It was a skeleton designed for function over form, a masterpiece of weight distribution that allowed the animal to grow to 16 meters while remaining as buoyant as the sea itself. In the quiet of the ancient ocean, this skeleton served as a hidden scaffolding, a silent partner to the mussels and the sea. It was the internal foundation that allowed Leedsichthys to become a titan of the Callovian, a structure that was perfectly tuned to the physics of a giant's life in the deep blue. In the vast, three-dimensional world of the Tethys, the greatest challenge for a giant is not movement, but the constant pull of gravity. To remain suspended in the water column without sinking to the dark benthos or bobbing to the surface, Leedsichthys utilized a sophisticated system of buoyancy control. It existed in a state of neutral buoyancy, a delicate equilibrium where its body weight was perfectly balanced by the displacement of the sea. As a member of the teleosteomorph group, Leedsichthys possessed a gas-filled organ known as a swim bladder, located just beneath the vertebral column. This internal sac acted as a biological ballast tank. By regulating the volume of gas within this organ, the fish could adjust its density relative to the surrounding water. This allowed the 16-meter titan to hover in the plankton-rich layers of the photic zone with almost zero muscular effort, conserving its energy for the long journey of growth. This weightlessness was further supported by the animal's skeletal composition. As we have seen, the extensive use of calcified cartilage instead of solid bone significantly reduced its overall mass. Furthermore, the tissues of Leedsichthys were likely infused with low-density lipids or oils, which provided additional lift. This combination of gas, cartilage, and oil transformed the massive fish into a creature of the air and underwater aeronaut drifting through the liquid sky of the Jurassic. Maintaining this balance required constant, subtle adjustments. As the Leedsichthys migrated through different temperatures and depth, the pressure of the water changed, affecting the volume of the gas in its swim bladder. The fish's physiology responded automatically, ensuring it remained perfectly positioned within the emerald haze of the plankton blooms. It was a life of effortless suspension governed by the laws of hydrostatics. In the silence of the deep, the Leedsichthys appears as a stationary monument held in place by the invisible hand of the ocean. It does not struggle to stay afloat, it is a natural part of the water's own density. The state of weightless grace allowed the giant to focus all its biological resources on the simple, rhythmic act of living, a peaceful inhabitant of the infinite blue. The transition from a living giant to a fossilized record is a journey of extreme rarity and chance. This process, known as taphonomy, begins the moment a Leedsichthys ceases its long, rhythmic journey through the Tethys. In the warm, shallow seas of the Jurassic, the body of such a massive animal would eventually lose its buoyancy and begin a slow, silent descent through the water column, settling finally into the soft grey embrace of the Oxford clay. For most creatures, this would be the end of their story, as scavengers and oxygen-rich currents would quickly dismantle their remains. However, the seafloor of this ancient basin was often anoxic, lacking the oxygen necessary to support deep-sea scavengers or rapid bacterial decay. As the Leedsichthys settled into the mud, it was shielded from the world above. The fine particles of clay, drifting down like a constant mineral snow, began to envelop the remains, sealing them in a pressurized tomb of silt. Over millions of years, the chemistry of the Earth took over. The soft tissues vanished, but the mineral-rich groundwater seeped into the porous structure of the bony plates and calcified cartilage. Atom by atom, the original biological material was replaced by minerals, turning the once lightweight skeleton into heavy, dark stone. The weight of the accumulating layers of the Jurassic and Cretaceous pressed down, flattening the remains but preserving their intricate details within the mudstone. The discovery of these giants began not in the sea, but in the industrial brick pits of the 19th century. In 1886, near Peterborough, England, a dedicated collector named Alfred Nicholson Leeds recognized unusual, massive fragments of bone emerging from the clay. He spent years meticulously recovering thousands of pieces needle-like gill rakers, broad skull plates, and robust fin rays. These fragments, initially confusing to science, were eventually recognized as the remains of the largest bony fish to ever inhabit the Earth. Today, the discovery of a Leedsichthys specimen is still a rare event. Each find provides a few more pieces of the puzzle, allowing scientists to reconstruct the anatomy of a giant that had been lost for 160 million years. These fossils are the only physical bridge to that silent blue world, a record of a titan that was once the master of the Tethys, now resting quietly in the earth of a different age. The world of Leedsichthys was a planet in transition. During the Middle Jurassic, the supercontinent of Pangaea had begun to fracture, its massive crustal plates pulling apart to create new gateways for the sea. At the heart of this tectonic shift lay the Tethys Ocean, a vast tropical seaway that stretched like a blue ribbon between the northern landmass of Laurasia and the southern continent of Gondwana. It was a global highway of warm water connecting the ancient Pacific to the emerging Atlantic. The specific home of the Leedsichthys, documented in the Oxford Clay, was a northern branch of this great ocean. It was an epicontinental sea, a shallow, sun-filled extension of the Tethys that flooded the low-lying regions of what is now Europe. This was not a single, open expanse, but a complex archipelago of islands and peninsulas, where the water remained calm and nutrient-rich. The geography of this era created a perfect laboratory for giantism, offering vast spaces without the violent turbulence of the deep open ocean. Because there were no polar ice caps during this greenhouse age, sea levels were significantly higher than they are today. The global climate was remarkably uniform, with tropical and subtropical conditions extending far into the northern and southern latitudes. This lack of extreme temperature gradients allowed Leedsichthys and its kin to migrate across vast distances without encountering thermal barriers. The Tethys was a world without borders, a continuous sanctuary of liquid warmth. The floor of this ocean was shaped by the slow, relentless movement of the plates. As the seabed expanded, it created deep basins and shallow shelves, directing the flow of the great Jurassic currents. These currents acted as conveyor belts, moving plankton and heat across the globe. The Leedsichthys was a product of this specific mapper traveler, designed for a world where the sea was the dominant force and the land was merely a collection of scattered outposts in a blue empire. To look at the map of the Middle Jurassic is to see a world tuned for the pelagic life. The Tethys offered the depth for growth, the warmth for metabolism, and the currents for food. It was the stage upon which the great filter feeder played its part, a vast and stable theatre that remained unchanged for millions of years. In the warm, stable waters of the Middle Jurassic, life operates according to the strict laws of thermodynamics. For a giant the size of Leedsichthys, every movement must be a calculated investment. To maintain a body of 16 meters while feeding on microscopic particles requires a state of profound metabolic efficiency. This is a life defined by the conservation of energy, a slow-motion existence where the cost of living is kept at a minimum. As an ectotherm, Leedsichthys relies on the ambient temperature of the Tethys to regulate its internal chemistry. In the greenhouse climate of the Callovian, the sea acts as a thermal blanket, maintaining a consistent warmth that supports the fish's biological functions without the need for high-energy internal heat production. This allows the animal to divert the majority of the calories it harvests from the plankton directly into growth and maintenance, rather than burning them simply to stay warm. The energy harvested by the gill rakers is processed through a slow, steady digestive system. Because the food zooplankton and fish larvae is already small and easily broken down, the metabolic burn required for digestion is low. The Leedsichthys does not experience the feast and famine cycles of large predators like the plesiosaurs. Instead, it lives in a state of continuous low-level intake. It is a biological machine designed for constant, low-intensity operation. This metabolic balance is reflected in the animal's behavior. There are no sudden bursts of speed, no high-energy displays. Every sweep of the tail is deliberate and rhythmic. By moving slowly through the water, the fish reduces the drag against its massive surface area, ensuring that the energy spent on propulsion never exceeds the energy gained from the filtration. It is a delicate equilibrium, a life balanced on the edge of a calorie, where success is measured by the ability to remain still in motion. Even the heart of the Leedsichthys beats with a slow, heavy regularity, pumping blood through the vast network of vessels recorded in its vascularized bone. This is the peace of the giant, a life lived in the slow lane of the evolutionary highway. By minimizing its needs and maximizing its intake, the Leedsichthys achieved a scale that few other creatures could ever sustain, proving that in the ancient ocean, the most efficient path to greatness was a quiet one. The stability of the Callovian world eventually gives way to the shifting tides of geological time. As the planet moves into the Oxfordian and Kimmeridgian stages, the environment of the Tethys Ocean begins to undergo a slow, irreversible transformation. These changes are not sudden cataclysms, but a gradual reorganization of the sea's architecture, a shift in the very foundations that supported the giant Leedsichthys. One of the primary drivers of this change is the continued movement of the continental plates. As Laurasia and Gondwana drift further apart, the narrow seaways of the European archipelago begin to widen and deepen. The shallow, protected basins that once allowed the Oxford clay to settle are replaced by more open, dynamic marine environments. This alters the patterns of occurrence, shifting the predictable upwelling events that once provided concentrated meadows of plankton. The climate, while still warm, begins to experience greater fluctuations. Shifts in oceanic circulation affect the distribution of nutrients, causing the vast plankton blooms to become more seasonal and less reliable. For a giant that requires a massive, constant intake of microscopic life, these disruptions to the food supply represent a significant challenge. The fossil record reflects a gradual decline in the diversity of the Pachycormidae family during this transition. As the environment changes, so too does the community of life. New lineages of marine reptiles and different groups of predatory fish begin to rise in prominence, adapting to the more turbulent waters of the late Jurassic. The niche of the massive, slow-moving filter feeder remains, but the specific conditions that allowed Leedsichthys to reach its maximum scale are slowly eroding. The emerald haze of the Callovian is thinning, and the sea is becoming a more demanding home. The Leedsichthys does not disappear overnight. It continues to drift through the deepening blue, a survivor of a golden age. However, the strata of the Earth show fewer and fewer of its massive remains as we move toward the boundary of the Cretaceous. The transition is a quiet one, a fading of a giant lineage, as the world it was designed for slowly evolves into something new. The era of the gentle Leviathan is drawing toward its natural conclusion, recorded in the changing layers of the ancient mud. The journey of the Leedsichthys concludes, not in a moment of violence, but in a gradual fading into the deep history of the Earth. As the Cretaceous period dawned, the specific conditions that allowed this gentle giant to flourish, the stable, shallow seas and the predictable, massive plankton blooms of the Tethys, were irrevocably altered. The lineage of the great pachycormids eventually went silent, leaving the open ocean to be reclaimed by new generations of travelers. Yet, the Leedsichthys never truly left us. It remains held in the amber-like grip of the Oxford clay, preserved in the very mud that once drifted through its gills. Today, its legacy is found in the quiet halls of museums and the active excavations of clay pits. Every fragment of a fossilized fin ray or a delicate gill raker is a letter from a world that existed 165 million years ago, a world where size was a manifestation of peace, not power. The study of this giant has reshaped our understanding of the ancient oceans. It proved that the niche of the great filter feeder, a role we once thought was reserved for modern whales and whale sharks, was actually pioneered by bony fish in the heart of the Jurassic. Leedsichthys serves as a biological bridge, showing us that the laws of ecology are timeless. Even in the age of reptiles, the ocean found a way to support a massive, rhythmic, and gentle existence fueled by the smallest of lives. In the stillness of a museum gallery, the reconstructed skeleton of a Leedsichthys invites us to slow our pace. It asks us to consider a time when the world was a vast, blue sanctuary of warmth and light. It reminds us that life, in all its complexity, has always found a balance between the tiny and the tremendous. The giant is a witness to the endurance of the natural world, a silent navigator of a sea that no longer exists. As we leave the waters of the Middle Jurassic, the image of the great fish remains, a silver great silhouette drifting forever through a sapphire dark. It continues its long, unhurried cruise through the strata of our imagination, a symbol of the profound and quiet beauty hidden within the deep layers of time. The story of the Leedsichthys is now part of the Earth itself, a whisper of a leviathan that once turned the sunlight of the Jurassic into the wonder of the present. The vastness of the Leedsichthys is not merely a matter of its external length, but of the intricate, microscopic world housed within its gills. To sustain a body of such immense displacement, the animal relies on a biological sieve of unparalleled complexity. As we drift closer to the cavernous mouth of the Titan, we move past the heavy dermal plates of the skull and into the soft red architecture of the branchial chamber. This is the engine of the giant, the place where the ocean's energy is harvested grain by grain. The branchial arches of Leedsichthys are among the most remarkable structures in the fossil record. Unlike the simple gill rakers of modern fish, these are specialized arrays of needle-like filaments, each one spaced with mathematical precision. Fossil evidence from the Oxford clay reveals that these rakers were not merely passive filters. They were covered in a fine, mesh-like tissue that allowed the animal to trap organisms as small as 0.5 millimeter. This is the zero-waste policy of the Jurassic age system, where even the smallest speck of organic matter is reclaimed by the giant. As the sea flows through this chamber, the physics of fluid dynamics takes over. The water does not simply pass through. It is channeled into thousands of tiny vortices or miniature whirlpools created by the specific angle of the rakers. These vortices slow the passage of the plankton, causing the microscopic life to adhere to the sticky mucus-lined surfaces of the gills. This process, known as cross-flow filtration, ensures that the gills do not become clogged with debris, allowing the Leedsichthys to feed continuously for hours without rest. Under a microscope, a single fossilized gill raker reveals a history of durability. The core of the raker is composed of calcified cartilage, giving it the flexibility to withstand the constant pressure of the Tethys currents. Surrounding this core is a layer of dense mineralized bone that provided the necessary rigidity. This hybrid construction is a fossil verified trait, a unique signature of the pachycormid family. It allowed the Leedsichthys to possess a filtration surface area that was proportionally larger than that of any other fish in history. In the silence of this inner chamber, the only sound is the rhythmic, heavy rush of water, a constant liquid friction that sustains the Titan's life. There is a profound peace in the realization that a creature of 16 meters is entirely dependent on these delicate, hair-like structures. Each raker is a silent worker, a guardian of the giant's metabolism. As the Leedsichthys glides through the sapphire dark, this internal sieve hums with the effort of the harvest, turning the invisible bounty of the sea into the living tissue of a leviathan. This is the microarchitecture of survival, a testament to how evolution can solve the problem of scale, through the refinement of the small. The Leedsichthys does not need to hunt, it only needs to exist, to move, and to let the ocean provide. To know the Leedsichthys, one must understand the liquid medium that defined its existence. The waters of the Oxfordian stage were a unique chemical sanctuary, far different from the oceans of the modern era. As we drift through the transparent blue, we are moving through a nutrient soup that was perfectly tuned to support massive filter-feeding vertebrates. Geochemical analysis of the Oxford clay sediments reveals a sea rich in dissolved minerals, particularly calcium and magnesium. During this greenhouse age, the high levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide led to slightly warmer and more acidic surface waters, which in turn accelerated the weathering of the surrounding continents. This weathering washed a constant stream of minerals into the Tethys, providing the raw materials for the shells of billions of planktonic organisms. For the Leedsichthys, this meant that the water it swam in was fundamentally thicker with life-sustaining elements. The salinity of these epicontinental seas was remarkably stable. Because the basin was shallow and sheltered, it did not experience the violent fluctuations in salt concentration seen in modern estuaries. This stability allowed the Leedsichthys to maintain its internal osmotic balance with very little energy expenditure. In a world where every calorie counts, the consistent chemistry of the Oxfordian sea was a form of energy subsidy. The animal's cells were in harmony with the salt of the sea, allowing its metabolism to focus entirely on the accumulation of mass. Furthermore, the oxygen profile of this ancient water was stratified. The upper layers, where the giant spent most of its life, were well oxygenated by the constant interaction with the atmosphere and the oxygen-producing phytoplankton. However, as we descend toward the seafloor, the oxygen levels drop significantly, creating an anoxic or oxygen-poor zone. This chemical barrier protected the remains of the Leedsichthys after its death, preventing scavengers from reaching the carcass and allowing the fine silts to begin the slow process of fossilization. We feel the weight of this water, a heavy, warm embrace that supports the body and fuels the blood. The chemistry of the Tethys was not a passive backdrop, it was a participant in the life of the giant. It determined the thickness of its bones, the efficiency of its gills, and the ultimate preservation of its legacy. In the quiet of the Jurassic, the sea was a living laboratory of minerals and light, a cradle of chemical perfection that allowed a fish to become a titan. The deep ocean is never truly silent. It is a world of vibrations, a medium where sound travels 5 times faster than in the air, carrying messages across vast, lightless distances. For the Leedsichthys, the Tethys was an acoustic landscape, a map drawn in sound and pressure. In this chapter, we explore the sensory world of the giant world, where every movement in the sea creates a ripple in the silence. As the Leedsichthys moves its massive caudal fin, it generates a low-frequency hummer sound, so deep that it is felt as much as it is heard. This infrasonic pulse travels for miles through the water, a rhythmic heartbeat that announces the presence of the titan to the rest of the sea. To a smaller fish, this hum is the sound of a moving mountain. To another Leedsichthys, it is a signal of a fellow traveler. This acoustic footprint is a fossil-verified reality, determined by the size of the animal's muscle blocks and the density of the surrounding water. The giant perceives this world through its lateral line system, a series of sensory pores running along the length of its body. These pores detect the acoustic shadows of other objects. When a school of belemnites darts nearby, or a plesiosaur glides through the midwater, they displace the water in specific patterns. The Leedsichthys, these displacements as a series of tactile clicks and hums. It is an underwater radar, allowing the fish to navigate the sapphire dark without ever needing to see. The sea itself provides a background chorus. There is the crackling of the plankton blooms, the muffled thud of distant waves breaking against the islands of the European archipelago, and the high-pitched pops of gas escaping from the shells of ammonites. In the silence of the night, these sounds become the primary guide for the giant. It follows the loudest concentrations of planktonic noise, drifting toward the areas where the marine snow is most active. Inside the skull of the Leedsichthys, we find the otoliths, the ear stones. These mineralized structures, preserved in the Oxford clay, are the record of the animal's balance and hearing. Their size suggests that the Leedsichthys was particularly sensitive to low-frequency vibrations, the very sounds produced by the ocean's great currents and upwellings. The giant was tuned to the frequency of the earth itself, a living resonator for the music of the Tethys. We listen to this world a muffled, heavy and rhythmic symphony. It is a world where sound is not an intrusion, but a connection. The acoustic world of the Leedsichthys is a reminder that even in the darkness of the deep, life is never isolated. It is a part of a constant liquid conversation, a dance of pressure and pulse that has been echoing through the strata for 160 million years. In the vast open corridors of the Tethys, no creature truly travels alone. For a giant like Leedsichthys, its massive body a moving landscape of muscle and bone functions as a floating ecosystem, a mobile sanctuary for a host of smaller, symbiotic companions. This chapter explores the quiet, interspecies relationships that define the life of the Titan, focusing on the organisms that found safety, transport, and sustenance in the shadow of the great fish. As the Leedsichthys glides through the sapphire water, it is often accompanied by a retinue of smaller, swifter fish. These companions are not competitors for food, nor are they prey. They are travelers seeking the protection provided by the giant's immense scale. Within the boundary layer of the Titan's skin, a thin zone of water that moves at the same speed as the fish itself. The energy required for swimming is significantly reduced. These smaller fish draft off the Leedsichthys, utilizing its massive wake to traverse the ocean with minimal effort. This is a fossil-verified behavior seen in modern pelagic giants, and the specialized morphology of Jurassic ray-finned fish suggests a similar reliance on the slipstreams of the era's leviathans. Beyond simple transport, the surface of the Leedsichthys is a habitat for specialized invertebrates. Small extinct crustaceans, ancestors of modern parasitic and commensal copepods, likely attach themselves to the dermal plates of the head and the trailing edges of the fins. These tiny passengers spend their entire lives on the giant, grazing on the thin film of algae and bacteria that inevitably grows on the fish's skin. In return for this mobile home, they act as cleaners, removing parasites and organic debris that might otherwise cause irritation or infection to the Titan. It is a relationship of mutual benefit, a silent act of survival performed in the slow-motion drift of the sea. In the cavernous mouth and around the gill slits, we find even more specialized guests. Small opportunistic fish might hover near the branchial chambers, darting in to catch the stray plankton that escapes the Titan's massive filtration sieve. To these smaller creatures, the Leedsichthys is a provider, a constant source of leftovers in an ocean where food is often scattered. The presence of these companions is recorded in the Oxford clay, where the fossils of small teleosts are frequently found in close proximity to the larger Leedsichthys remains, suggesting they perished together in the same ecological moment. The giant is also a shield. For many small organisms, the mere shadow of a 16-meter fish is enough to deter predators. An ichthyosaur or a plesiosaur, while capable of hunting small fish, might hesitate to approach a school that is tucked tightly against the flank of a Leedsichthys. The giant's sheer mass creates a safe zone in the open water, a temporary refuge for the vulnerable. This communal existence turns the Leedsichthys into more than just an individual. It is a community, a living hub of biodiversity moving through the liquid desert of the Tethys. There is a profound, quiet beauty in this symbiosis. It reflects a world where life is not just a struggle for dominance, but a complex web of cooperation. The Titan provides the space and the safety, while the small provide the services that keep the Titan healthy. This relationship is a steady, rhythmic pulse, the small heartbeat of the passengers echoing the heavy, slow heartbeat of the host. As the Leedsichthys drifts, it carries with it a microcosm of the Jurassic Sea, a testament to the interconnectedness of all things in the deep blue. In the dim light of the Callovian, we see this entourage as a shimmering cloud of movement surrounding the steady, dark core of the giant. It is a dance of the small around the great, a silent symphony of travelers who have found their home in the movement of another. The Leedsichthys is a benevolent monarch of the pelagic zone. Its journey a shared experience for thousands of lives that will never know the sea without its shadow. To understand the life of Leedsichthys, one must understand the rhythm of the planet it inhabited. The Middle Jurassic was not merely a time of different animals, but a time of a different global heartbeat. The Earth existed in a greenhouse state, a climatic phase defined by a lack of polar ice caps and a profound thermal equilibrium that extended from the equator to the high latitudes. This chapter explores the cosmic and planetary cycles that dictated the temperature, currents, and very survival of the giant, creating a world where warmth was the constant and stability was the rule. The atmosphere of the Jurassic was heavy with carbon dioxide, fueled by massive volcanic activity from the rifting of the supercontinent Pangaea. This high concentration of greenhouse gases acted as a global insulator, trapping the sun's energy and preventing the formation of permanent ice at the poles. For the Leedsichthys, this meant that the Tethys Ocean was a world of liquid gold from surface to seabed. There were no freezing currents descending from the north, no icy barriers to halt a migration. The giant could travel from the northern archipelago of what is now England to the southern shores of Gondwana without ever experiencing a significant drop in metabolic efficiency. This global warmth drove a unique oceanic circulation system. In our modern world, currents are often powered by the sinking of cold, salty water at the poles. In the Jurassic, the engine was different. The currents were driven by evaporation and salinity gradients in the tropical zones. As the sun beat down on the shallow, expansive epicontinental seas, the water became saltier and denser, eventually sinking and pushing the deep, nutrient-laden waters back toward the surface. This created a slow, deliberate conveyor belt of nutrients that was far more stable and predictable than the erratic currents of today. The seasons of the Jurassic were marked not by snow and ice, but by the shifting of the monsoon belts. As the Earth tilted in its celestial dance, the great land masses of Laurasia and Gondwana heated and cooled at different rates, drawing moisture-laden winds across the Tethys. These seasonal winds were the conductors of the ocean's symphony. They dictated the timing of the upwellings and the location of the plankton blooms. A Leedsichthys would have felt the change in the seasons through the subtle shift in the water's pressure and the arrival of certain chemical signatures carried by the wind-driven waves. The stability of this climate allowed for extreme longevity. In a world without sudden cold snaps or dramatic environmental shifts, biological cycles could stretch over decades. The bone histology of the Leedsichthys, those concentric rings we explored earlier, records these paleoclimatic rhythms with the precision of a master clock. Each line of arrested growth represents a year of the greenhouse cycle, a record of a summer monsoon or a winter stabilization. The giant was a living barometer of the Earth's health, its very mass a testament to the reliability of the Jurassic sun. There is a meditative quality to this planetary stability. Imagine a world where the ocean temperature varies by only a few degrees over thousands of miles. This thermal constancy allowed the Leedsichthys to evolve into its massive form without the need for complex internal heating mechanisms. It was a creature in perfect balance with its atmosphere. The giant did not fight its environment, it was a manifestation of it. It was the product of a planet that had found a peaceful, warm equilibrium, a world where the rhythm of the tides and the pulse of the sun were the only clocks that mattered. As we drift in the warm, heavy water of the Oxfordian, we feel the slow, deep breathing of the Earth. The paleoclimatic rhythms were the invisible scaffolding of the Titan's life. Without this greenhouse piece, the Leedsichthys could never have reached its 16-meter scale. It required a planet that was willing to stay warm and steady for millions of years. This chapter is a tribute to that ancient stability, a reminder that the giants of the past were not just accidents of nature, but the children of a specific golden climate that has long since faded into the cold of the modern age. Every giant begins as a speck of potential, a singular life form navigating the perilous transition from the microscopic to the majestic. For the Leedsichthys, the journey from a fertilized egg to a 16-meter titan is a narrative of rapid transformation and extreme survival. In this chapter, we explore the early life stages of the giant, tracing the development of a hatchling as it maneuvers through the predator-dense nurseries of the Middle Jurassic archipelago. The life of a Leedsichthys begins in the nutrient-rich shallows, likely near the sheltered coastlines of the European landmasses. While the adult is a pelagic wanderer of the open blue, the juvenile is a creature of the fringes. Fossil evidence of smaller pachycormid fish suggests that these giants likely produced large quantities of small eggs scattered into the water column to drift with the tides. Unlike modern mammals that invest heavily in a few offspring, the Leedsichthys utilized a strategy of abundance. Out of thousands of hatchlings, only a handful would ever reach the safety of size. The newly hatched Leedsichthys is a creature of high energy movement. At this stage, it does not yet possess the specialized gill rakers of its parents. Instead, it is a suction feeder, darting through the water to capture individual zooplankton. Its body is slender and agile, designed for quick bursts of speed to escape the notice of smaller predators like the agile Caturus or young ichthyosaurs. This is the most dangerous epoch of its life. Without the protection of mass, the juvenile must rely on the complexity of the environment, hiding within the forests of Jurassic macroalgae or the shadow of submerged limestone reefs. As the juvenile grows, its physiology undergoes a profound shift. This is the period of exponential growth, recorded in the innermost layers of its bone tissue. To reach a size that discourages predation, the young Leedsichthys must consume a staggering amount of biomass relative to its body weight. During these early years, the bone histology shows an absence of lines of arrested growth, indicating that the animal did not stop growing even for a season. It was a race against the jaws of the world. By the time it reached 3 to 5 meters in length, its ecological role began to change. It started to transition from a suction feeder to a filter feeder, as the first rows of gill rakers began to calcify and extend across the branchial arches. This transition marks the adolescence of the giant, now too large for most small predators, but still vulnerable to the great pliosaurs of the deep. The adolescent Leedsichthys begins to move further from the shore. It joins the pelagic currents, following the scent of the plankton blooms into the open Tethys. It is during this phase that the social structures of the species, if they existed, would have become relevant. While we have no direct fossil proof of pods, the consistent distribution of similar-sized specimens in certain strata suggests that juveniles of a certain age may have traveled together for safety, creating a wall of moving silver that confused the senses of the hunters. The development of the fins during this stage is critical. The tail grows proportionally larger, shifting from a flexible darting tool to a rigid rhythmic engine of endurance. The pectoral fins lengthen, providing the stability needed for a heavier body. The juvenile is no longer fighting the water, it is learning to use the water as a support. By the time it reaches its first decade of life, the Leedsichthys has achieved a safety in size that allows it to slow its pace. The frantic energy of the hatchling is replaced by the meditative cruise of the titan. There is a quiet dignity in this progression. Every adult Leedsichthys we find in the Oxford clay is a survivor of 1,000 close calls. Each one carried the memory of the shallows within its bones, a record of the time when it was small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. As we watch the adolescent giant drift into the deeper blue, we see the blueprint of greatness being realized. It is the story of life's persistence, the transformation of a fragile spark into a leviathan that would eventually define an entire geological age. To propel 16 meters of living mass through the dense medium of the sea requires more than just strength. It requires a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering. The tail of Leedsichthys, or the caudal fin, is the primary engine of its existence. Unlike the swift, frantic tails of smaller prey fish or the vertical shark-like appendages of many of its contemporaries, the tail of this giant was designed for one specific purpose: the high-efficiency, long-distance cruise. In this chapter, we deconstruct the anatomy of this engine, exploring how bone, muscle, and fluid dynamics combine to create the Titan's rhythmic propulsion. The structure of the Leedsichthys tail is known as Homo cercal in its outward appearance, but possesses a complex internal architecture inherited from its more primitive ancestors. Fossilized fin rays, or Lepidotrichia, recovered from the Oxford clay, show that the tail was exceptionally broad and tall, providing a massive surface area to push against the water. These rays were not solid, brittle sticks. They were composed of segmented, mineralized bone that allowed the fin to be both rigid and flexible. This flexibility is key. As the tail sweeps through the water, the trailing edge bends slightly, creating a flicking motion that recovers energy from the surrounding eddies. The power behind this fin came from massive blocks of muscle known as myomeres. These W-shaped muscle segments ran the length of the fish's body, anchored to a central axis of calcified cartilage. When the Leedsichthys swam, these muscles contracted in a wave-like sequence, a movement known as subcarangiform locomotion. In this style of swimming, the front half of the body remains relatively stiff to reduce drag, while the posterior half undulates with increasing amplitude. This creates a powerful side-to-side sweep of the tail that generates immense forward thrust with remarkably little effort. One of the most fascinating aspects of this propulsion system is its relationship with Strouhal numbers, a mathematical ratio used in fluid dynamics to measure the efficiency of flapping or oscillating bodies. Research into large pelagic filter feeders suggests that Leedsichthys likely operated within an optimal range of 0.25 to 0.35. This means that for every stroke of its tail, the giant moved forward with the maximum possible efficiency, wasting almost no energy on unnecessary turbulence. The tail was not designed for a sprint. It was a low RPM, revolutions per minute, engine, built to run for decades without stopping. The skin covering the tail also played a role in its mechanical success. While we do not have direct impressions of Leedsichthys' skin, we can infer from its close relatives that it was likely covered in fine microscopic ridges or specialized scales. These structures would have served to channel the water smoothly over the surface of the fin, delaying the point at which the water becomes turbulent. By maintaining a laminar flow where the water moves in smooth parallel layers, the giant further reduced the cost of transport. This allowed it to maintain a cruising speed of several knots while burning only a fraction of the calories a smaller, less efficient swimmer would require. We can imagine the visual impact of this engine in motion. The tail, perhaps 3 or 4 meters from tip to tip, moving with the slow, heavy grace of a swinging pendulum. With each sweep, a massive volume of water is displaced, pushing the 16-meter body forward into the nutrient-rich currents. It is a movement that feels more like a force of nature than an act of biology, a rhythmic, unstoppable pulse that connects the giant to the very tides of the Tethys. In the silence of the deep, the tail is the only thing that creates a sound, a low-frequency vibration that resonates through the water column. It is the sound of endurance. The Leedsichthys does not need to be fast because it has already won the race of survival through persistence. Its tail is the ultimate tool of a traveler, an engine that turned the simple act of swimming into a meditative state of being. As we watch the giant disappear into the blue haze of the Jurassic, it is the steady, rhythmic beat of that massive tail that remains in our minds, the heartbeat of a leviathan echoing through time. To envision the mind of a 16-meter titan, we must look beyond the sheer mass of its body and into the protected internal world of its cranium. The neural landscape of Leedsichthys is a study in specialized simplicity. In a creature where every biological resource is dedicated to growth and filtration, the brain is not a center of complex social calculation or high-level problem solving, but a sophisticated sensory processing station. It is the quiet conductor of a vast biological orchestra, ensuring that every gill raker, muscle block, and sensory pore operates in perfect harmony with the Jurassic Sea. The brain of Leedsichthys, protected by a series of thin, overlapping dermal plates, was relatively small in proportion to its total body mass, a common trait among large ectothermic filter feeders. However, size is not a measure of efficiency. When we examine the internal casts of related pachycormid skulls, we see a neural structure dominated by the optic lobes and the olfactory bulbs. This indicates a world perceived through a blend of light and chemistry. The giant's intelligence was a sensory one. It possessed an incredible ability to read the chemical signatures of the Tethys, detecting the faint scent of a plankton bloom from miles away. Central to this neural map was the cerebellum, the region responsible for motor control and balance. In a 16-meter animal, coordinating the rhythmic sweep of the tail with the opening of the massive branchial chambers is a complex task of timing and equilibrium. The cerebellum processed a constant stream of data from the otoliths, inner earstones, and the lateral line system, making micro-adjustments to the fish's orientation. The Leedsichthys lived in a state of proprioceptive grace, a constant intuitive awareness of its massive body's position in a three-dimensional liquid void. The mind of the giant was likely a meditative one, without the predatory drive to hunt or the constant social pressure of a complex herd. The neural activity of Leedsichthys would have been dominated by the steady, rhythmic pulse of its environment. It existed in a state of sensory flow, where the boundaries between the animal and the ocean were blurred. When the lateral line detected a change in pressure or the olfactory bulbs registered a surge in nutrients, the response was not one of excitement, but of a gradual, inevitable shift in course, slow-motion reaction, governed by the deep, ancient rhythms of the brainstem. Furthermore, the neural landscape was tuned to the circadian and seasonal cycles of the Jurassic. The pineal organ, located near the top of the brain, would have detected the subtle changes in light levels through the translucent plates of the skull, acting as a biological clock. This internal timer signaled when to rise to the surface for the nocturnal plankton migrations, and when to begin the long seasonal journeys across the Tethys. The giant did not think about time. It felt time as a series of shifting lights and temperatures, its nervous system a mirror of the planet's own cycles. There is a profound peace in considering this neural simplicity. The Leedsichthys was not burdened by the anxieties of the hunter or the complexities of the higher mind. Its neural world was one of pure, unfiltered experience. The rush of water, the taste of the salt, the vibration of the deep, and the steady glow of the sun through the blue. It was a consciousness of the moment, a life lived in a continuous, liquid now. As we look at the fossilized skull fragments of this leviathan, we are looking at the container of a unique perspective. The Leedsichthys was a silent witness to millions of years of oceanic history, its brain recording the pulse of the Middle Jurassic in a language of sensory signals we are only just beginning to translate. It was a mind perfectly suited to its scale, slow, steady, and infinitely patient to the quiet, neural heart of a titan. The exterior of the Leedsichthys is its first point of contact with the vastness of the Tethys, a protective boundary that separates the internal life of the giant from the external pressures of the sea. In this chapter, we explore the tapestry of the giant's skin, a complex surface of dermal plates and specialized scales that served as both a suit of armor and a masterpiece of hydrodynamic efficiency. While the soft tissues have long since vanished, the fossilized remnants of the dermal skeleton provide a vivid blueprint of how this titan interfaced with the liquid world. In the pachycormid lineage, the scales underwent a unique evolutionary transformation. While their ancestors possessed heavy, diamond-shaped ganoid scales, thick plates covered in a glass-like enamel, the Leedsichthys transitioned toward a much lighter and more flexible covering. The scales of the giant were remarkably small and thin in proportion to its massive body, often reduced to delicate needle-like or oval-shaped structures. This reduction in scale size was a critical adaptation for a 16-meter animal. It allowed for a much greater degree of skin flexibility, enabling the titan to undulate its massive body with the fluidity required for efficient swimming. This microlithic scale pattern created a surface that was not smooth, but subtly textured. From a hydrodynamic perspective, this texture is essential. As water flows over a perfectly smooth surface at high speeds, it tends to stick, creating a heavy drag. However, the thousands of tiny overlapping scales of the Leedsichthys created a boundary layer of microturbulence. This turbulence acted as a lubricant, allowing the main body of water to slide past the fish with minimal friction. It is the same principle found in the denticles of modern sharks, or the dimples on a golf ball, a texture designed to cheat the physics of resistance. The head of the giant was protected by a different kind of architecture. Here, the scales merged into large, robust dermal plates. These plates were not buried deep within the flesh, but sat just beneath the surface, forming a rigid scaffolding for the skull. Fossil verified fragments from the Oxford clay show that these plates were often ornamented with fine ridges and pits, a sign of active blood vessel networks that may have helped regulate the animal's temperature or provided a sensory map of the surrounding water pressure. This dermal armor was particularly thick around the gill covers opercula, protecting the delicate filtration machinery from the turbulence of the open sea. Furthermore, the skin of the Leedsichthys likely possessed a sophisticated system of mucus glands. In the modern ocean, large fish secrete a layer of biological slime that serves multiple purposes. It reduces drag even further, protects against parasites, and acts as an antibacterial shield. For a filter feeder that spent decades in the same warm tropical waters, this chemical cloak would have been its primary defense against the biofouling of algae and barnacles. The giant was a self-cleaning vessel, its skin a living, breathing barrier that maintained its pristine condition through millions of gallons of water. The visual appearance of this skin would have been a spectacle of light and shadow. Depending on the mineral content of the scales, the Leedsichthys might have possessed a shimmering iridescent quality common in ray-finned fish. As it moved through the sunlit photic zone, its flanks would catch the light in ripples of silver and leaden grey, camouflaging its massive bulk against the shifting patterns of the surface. This is the tapestry of the Titan, a functional, beautiful, and highly engineered surface that allowed a 16-meter creature to move through the water with the silence of a ghost. As we look closer at a single fossilized scale, we see the history of a life lived in motion. We see the growth rings of the bone and the scars of old encounters. The skin was the giant's autobiography, written in the language of minerals and texture. It was the shield that allowed the Leedsichthys to endure the long centuries of the Jurassic, a testament to the fact that in the ocean, even the largest of beings is defined by the smallest of details.